Good morning. I'd like to thank everyone for coming to this incredible event, and I'd just like to say I'm so excited and grateful to be here speaking in front of you today. Before I begin, I want to start off by saying that I am a little nervous. I've presented before as a Duke student. I've done presentations, but they've mostly been more of the, here's a report I did or a paper I read, and less of the, this is me and my experience. So I appreciate you all being here with me on this journey today. For as long as I can remember, I'd wanted to be an astronaut. I had glow-in-the-dark planets hanging from my bedroom ceiling. I would read these really nerdy textbooks written by Isaac Asimov in my elementary school library, and I loved going outside and just looking at the stars. And then, when I was in the third grade, I rode my first roller coaster and realized that was just not going to happen. So, third grade me had a big decision to make. I had to change course and think about what I wanted my career to be, because this is how I thought. And I thought about my love of science and all the things I was into in my classes, and I thought maybe medicine would be a pretty good potential path for me. And that might sound naive, but I'm a stubborn person, and when I make a decision, I go with it. So I took this decision of my path as a future doctor pretty seriously. I started volunteering in the hospital as young as I could, volunteering in the emergency department and speaking with patients, especially those who were going through some pretty challenging times, and just hearing their story. I was able to join a science research program in my high school, and I was lucky enough to go to UCLA, where I did some neuroimaging research and really discovered that I was fascinated and loved learning about the brain. And most importantly, I took every opportunity I could to shadow any doctor who would have me, typically just making connections through family friends. So, as I mentioned before, I'm stubborn. And I took the same approach to looking at schools. I knew what I wanted. I knew I wanted to be a doctor. So I was just looking for whatever university would give me the best opportunity to do that. So when I stepped onto Duke's campus and saw the chapel and Cameron Indoor, I just got a feeling. I decided right there, yep, this is what I'm going to do. This is where I'm going to go. So when my finger was hovering over that submit button on my application, I felt confident that I was making the right decision. When I finally got to Duke, you have those questions that all new students have. Do I belong here? Can I really hang with all these incredibly bright people? Am I worthy of this opportunity? But luckily, Duke doesn't really give you that much time to think about that. They just throw you into the classes. And I was always confident as a student that, I was a learner. If you hand me a textbook, tell me the plan, I feel like I can answer your question. And just like I took that approach in my studies, I kind of found my textbook to my Duke experience. I found a great group of friends who have supported me throughout my entire undergraduate career, and some of whom are here supporting me today. I found some of the great things that Duke has to offer, including the best college basketball program in the nation, especially in the Triangle. And I also started to find the places that I'd be most comfortable on campus, particularly the lowest level of the library where all of my friends study. It's called L2. There's no natural light, and it is filled with this weird smell and stacks and stacks and stacks of books, and I absolutely love it there. So I also enjoyed the sort of daily grind of being a pre-medical student at Duke. As tough as the classes were, I found them fascinating, even organic chemistry. I found a lab that I loved working in and would end up becoming a little family for me. And as I learned more and more in my classes, the shadowing experiences start to mean more. For example, I had the opportunity after my freshman year to shadow my next-door neighbor, Dr. Dennis, who's a neurosurgeon. And don't get me wrong, I loved being in the operating room. That chill of the minus 40 degrees that they keep it at, watching the doctor walk in all scrubbed in with no nerves. I just thought this was such a cool place to be. But the experience that I remember most shadowing Dr. Dennis wasn't actually in the operating room. It was after he finished the surgery, and he sat me down next to one of the monitors, and he just started going through cases with me. And he started showing me how all of his patients were a little bit different. They all needed a different course of treatment and a different approach to how to treat them. I remember one case he showed me all this fluid that was building up in the CT scan inside the skull and said this is a subdural hemorrhage and I had to treat it so this way. And then he also showed me this little ring in another patient and said, this is the circle of Willis. And if you ever see this glowing like a Christmas tree, you're having some problems. Anyway, like I said, and this is going to be a recurring theme, I'm a stubborn kid. And when I got sick at 19 years old, my sophomore year with the flu, I was trying really hard not to let that get me down. It was a stressful time. It was midterm season, and I missed an entire week of class, but I was still texting my friends, trying to get notes, trying to keep up with all the work that I missed, and spent a couple sick days with the flu in L2 studying, a little more than I should have. I finally started to feel like I was turning the corner, getting a little bit better, and I was ready to hang out with my friends a little bit and just relax for one day before I went back to another long Sunday in the library. Now, as I would come to learn, there are 3 textbook ways that an aneurysm can rupture. The first is having sex. The second is during vigorous exercise. And the third is straining to poop. Now, I'm sure you guys can guess which one did me in. But to give you a hint, I wasn't having sex and I was not in the gym. Anyways, while I was doing my business, I had this feeling in the back of my head as if a wet sponge was kind of being squeezed and then the pain came on. And this new symptom I just associated with the flu, but it was something different. I mean, I felt like my head was in a vice that was just being tightened, hurt more and more. I felt like I had metal rods going through my temples. So instinctively, I called my parents, telling them that I think I had this post-flu headache and it really hurts, but I don't really know what's going on. And of course, the warriors that they are, they said, you should go to the hospital. And I said, no, there's no need to do that. I just have the flu. So I went and I hung out with my friends, and then I woke up the next day on Sunday, getting ready for my exam the next day. And I called again and I said, I don't really know what's going on with this headache, but it's not going away and I think it's getting worse. And once again, they begged me to go to the emergency room. And my stubborn self said, no, that's ridiculous. So I compromised and I went to urgent care. And I went in and my usual self said, oh, I think I have this flu headache. It's really not a big deal, but if you have anything that could help me out, that'd be great. And I got a shot of Toradol and some medication to help me sleep off the headache. Now, I didn't take that medication because I drove right back to the library and tried to start studying for my biology exam. Now, as you can imagine, since I was bleeding internally, that was not really going to happen. So after 30 minutes of trying to study, I emailed my teachers and said, I'm so sorry. I know that this is not like me at all. I really hate to do this, but I don't think I can take the exam tomorrow, and asked for a delay. I went home, took these medications to help me sleep, and to be honest, that was really the last thing I remember for a long time. But the way the story goes, I called my parents that next morning around 5 a.m., and I was crying. I was hysterical, saying that this is the worst pain that I've ever had, and I don't think I can do this anymore. Once again, they begged me to go to the hospital, and finally, I obliged, of course with some conditions. I said, it takes a long time when you're in the emergency room. There's usually a long way. I'm going to go shower, change, make sure I'm comfortable, do all the things I need to do. Then I'll go to the emergency room. So my dad and my mom, they knew that I was not myself, that something was wrong. So my dad got a plane ticket to come down to Durham to stay with me, and my mom was going to stay at home and take care of my sister, who was a sophomore in high school at the time. Finally, I stopped answering my phone calls when they were checking to make sure I got to the emergency room. And knowing how stubborn I am, they thought maybe I was just, kind of lying and saying I was going to go and I was just going to stay at home. So they checked Find My iPhone and saw that I stayed there. And when I wasn't answering, they called the police. And when the police came in, they found me in a semi-conscious state, and I really couldn't stand or support myself in any way. And I lived in a third-floor walk-up on Central Campus at Duke University, and there was no way that I was getting down those stairs. So they called EMS, and they gurned me down and brought me to the emergency room. Now, as a 19-year-old kid, admittedly, when I walked in there with a really bad headache, they were not thinking that I had a ruptured brain aneurysm, and rightfully so. They started working through the cases. They thought maybe I had meningitis, then perhaps encephalitis. But when they did the lumbar puncture and they saw blood in my CSF, they thought it would be prudent to give me a scan. In doing so, they realized that I had a subarachnoid hemorrhage from a ruptured brain aneurysm. And when I saw that scan, apparently, and I asked for forgiveness, but in my defense, I was bleeding in my brain. I turned to my dad, who was a wreck, and I said, I remember seeing this with Dr. Danis. He said this was the worst thing that could happen to you. So, yeah, I'm sorry about that. I'm sure that was great for his nerves. So they went into action. They met with the on-call surgeon, who's Dr. Zomrati, who we're so thankful to have in our lives, and they started going through my case. I had an 18-millimeter bilobed aneurysm in my posterior communicating artery, and it was complicated. He wasn't really sure what he was going to do and wanted to wait until he had the morning staff, the people he was most comfortable with, before he did the surgery. They ended up deciding to put 2 clips to secure my aneurysm, and I would then go to the neuro ICU, where I would stay for well over a month. The next thing I remember, I was waking up in a hospital room, a place I'd never been before, and I was surrounded by what felt like 25 strangers who I'd never met. They started asking me questions like, do I know who I was? Do I know where I was? And I figured it seems like I'm in the hospital, but I don't know where. And they asked me if I knew why I was there, and I had no idea. So that's when they explained that I had a ruptured brain aneurysm, a subarachnoid hemorrhage, and I was going to be here for a while. So at first I was obviously a little taken aback. I didn't really know how to react. But luckily, one of the amazing nurse practitioners, Honey, came and brought me Chick-fil-A chicken minis. And I don't know if you've ever had Chick-fil-A chicken minis, but they're these little chicken nuggets on honey biscuits, and they're just the most amazing thing in the world. You have to get them if you haven't had them. And so as I started eating them, because I was really hungry, everyone was looking at me weirdly as if I was doing something out of the ordinary. And when I asked what was going on, they explained that apparently I'd been a very stubborn patient, and for the past couple days I'd refused to eat, and when they tried to put a feeding tube in, I fought them and prevented them from doing so. And then I said, you should have brought me Chick-fil-A, and then I would have eaten them. I feel like that was a pretty fair request. But I soon started to, grasp the severity of my situation. They had me put my hands up as if I was holding a pizza box, and I couldn't stop my hands from turning in. I looked at my arms, and I saw that I had IVs and tubes coming in from everywhere. I had a central line, and they explained to me what the plan was. They showed me on the little board that's in all the patient rooms, a little oscillating line with a trend upwards, and said, this is what your recovery is going to be like. You're going to have your ups and you're going to have your downs, but you're always going to be moving forward. And I said, I'm ready for this. Just give me the textbook, tell me the plan, and I'll do it. So I got my marching orders. I was to eat as much salt as possible, which at first sounded like a dream, as I ate Panda Express and Chick-fil-A for pretty much every meal. And then after about 2 days, I realized that this is not that fun, especially considering I wasn't allowed to drink any water. I was on blood pressure medication that made my arteries kind of pop out of my body, freaking my parents out, but that's something they'd have to get used to during this experience. And to the best of my ability, I was supposed to do everything I could to strengthen my body, walk when I can, but I realized I wasn't the same person I was. My hands were shaking. As a 19-year-old kid, you wouldn't expect to need help doing so many things that seem so normal. Every time I had to go to the bathroom, I had to call my nurse in, and she would help me up, but I'd kind of dip and dive under all these tubes, and she would stand with the door open, holding my monitors, and I'd lack a privacy that I never thought I wouldn't have. Every day, a really nice nurse would come in and ask me if I'd be okay letting her wash me with these wipes, because I obviously couldn't shower. And I always ended up kind of saying no, that they can just give me the wipes and I'll deal with them myself, because not having that autonomy was something that I wasn't used to. But things started getting better. I ended up getting strong enough to get up and finally start walking with help around the unit. Even though I was in vasospasm, I still felt like I was doing exactly what they said. I was getting better. I was heading upwards. And eventually, they said I was getting good enough where I was soon going to be able to go to the neuro step-down unit, which was sort of a big milestone that was always kind of out there and never really felt like a place that I would get to. But obviously, this sounds a little too good to be true. I wasn't exactly your textbook case, so obviously things were going too well for something not to change things up. So when I had my follow-up angiogram and they saw that my aneurysm was growing between the clips, I found that I was going to need another surgery. But still okay. I was still upbeat. This is not going to be another open craniotomy, nothing that intense. It was going to be endovascular and a pretty quick recovery, something that they would do as an outpatient had I not been a subarachnoid hemorrhage case. And I started immediately on Plavix. And they said, don't worry, you're still going to the step-down unit. You're still moving forward. It's just a bump. And I was okay with that. Now, the day I was supposed to move to the neuro step-down unit, they took all my IVs out. They took my central line out, which was a really big deal for me. And everyone wanted me to go on one last walk around the unit as a sort of victory lap. But I don't know, something just felt off. I don't know if it was lethargy or I was tired or maybe I just got so used to being in the neuro ICU that I didn't want to leave my new home. But as I was going on that walk, I ended up, starting to feel lightheaded. I couldn't catch my breath and I passed out. They wheeled me back frantically to my room, and once again I was in what felt like a strange place with what felt like 25 people in my room, but this time they weren't smiling. They seemed nervous, so I was nervous, and my parents were crying, so they had to be escorted out of the room, and that was going to be a big setback for me. The worst part was they had to put everything that they just took out kind of back in. So because of my reaction to whatever, my lungs were filling with fluid and my blood pressure was so low that they kept trying to stick me and find a vein where they could get an IV in, but it just wasn't working, and I kind of sat there with the oxygen mask on, just kind of reaching out for some relief, but I wasn't getting any. When I woke up the next day, we started to figure out what was going on. We didn't know what the cause was, but it was clear that I developed acute respiratory distress syndrome, and I wasn't going to be leaving the neuro ICU anytime soon. So even though this was kind of a crushing blow, I didn't really have any options. I had to do what they wanted me to do because I wanted to get out of here. So once again, the plan changed, but I was comfortable. I got my new plan. I was on the BiPAP, which I don't know if anyone here has been on that, but I was not a fan. I had to do respiratory therapy where they put me kind of leaning backwards and then shake my bed a bunch, which was kind of weird, but not the worst thing in the world. And slowly but surely, despite the bumps, I was moving forward again. And finally, I was able to go into that procedure and have the stent put in to secure my aneurysm. And went back to the neuro ICU and continued recovering, still in vasospasm. Then one day, my parents come up to me, and I seemed to be pretty stable, and they said, we don't want to put too much pressure on you, but we really could use, a shower and a nap of maybe an hour. Do you mind if we go back to the hotel room and leave you here for no more than 2 hours? And I said, please, you guys have been amazing by my side this whole time. Do whatever you need. I'm good. And of course, that's when Dr. Zomrati decided to walk in after they left to come in and tell me, so, things are going pretty well. You look like you're doing pretty good, and I think you can get out of here. And I go, oh, am I finally going to the neuro step-down unit? And he goes, no, I think you can go home. And so I didn't know how to react. My first feeling was, there's no way this neuro step-down unit's a real place. But I then thought this great sense of accomplishment, like I had succeeded. I did it. I beat the aneurysm. But I would quickly learn that that wasn't exactly the case. When I left the hospital, I thought my recovery was over, but it was just one more step in a long path of recovery. When I was in the hospital, I had a daily purpose. I had a very, very clearly delineated plan. They would round on me. They'd say, here's what you're doing today. And I said, I'm good. Let's do it. Let's get it done. I had my friends taking off time from class when they could to come visit me in the hospital, and they were an incredible support network that I had. And when I went home, I kind of lost all that because my friends from home were obviously at school, and my friends from school were at school. And even though I wasn't in the hospital anymore, I still kind of felt like a patient. And while I expected things to be exactly the same as before, they weren't. My hands were shaking when I was trying to do simple things like pouring a bowl of cereal. So I started going to occupational therapy to help right that ship. I didn't really have, a reason to wake up in the morning because I was kind of just waiting to go back to school. So I, would maybe watch a couple videos to pretend like I was still a student, but I would also go to therapy to try to work through some of these feelings. And it was through this experience that I realized that this was not going to be something that I could just move on from. Some of the worst feelings that I had were the idea of survivor's guilt, the questions of why was I the one who survived when 4 out of 10 people die from a ruptured brain aneurysm, and all things considered, I feel relatively normal, with 2/3 of people who do survive having neurological deficits. And this whole experience, working to this symposium, has been a great place to put that energy. So I'm very thankful to have you guys all here today because it sort of encompasses something that I've been working towards and working through. But more importantly, I realized that this experience doesn't just change you physically, although for many of us it does. It also changes you mentally. And I was surprised to find out that the road to recovery was so much more than just securing the aneurysm. As survivors, our stories truly begin before our aneurysms rupture, and they continue way beyond the time we leave the hospital or we get that last treatment. And that's something that always needs to be thought about when you're treating these patients. By putting the patient at the center of their stories and working harder and smarter to coordinate all aspects of their care will undoubtedly improve so many lives. So here's the challenge that we're faced with today, trying to get outside of our comfort zones, our protocols of how we treat our patients in our job, in our specific responsibilities, and think about just how we're helping these patients get back to the lives that they're trying to live. Now, because of the care I received, I'm so thankful to still be working towards that dream a naive third grader had of being a doctor. And I'm excited to report that I'll be applying to med school in the next cycle, and not so excited to report that I'll be taking the MCAT in January. But I feel like everyone should have this opportunity to, pursue their dreams and not let something like this get them down. And I think with all the brain power and the stories and experiences in this room, that's something that we can definitely achieve. Thank you so much for listening to my story. And if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.